As Syrians continue to celebrate the fall of the Assad regime, the country now has a new interim prime minister. Mohamad al-Bashir previously governed a small rebel-controlled area in Syria's northwest. He takes over from the previous prime minister, who has been working with the rebels to coordinate the transfer of power since the fall of the government. Al-Bashir is tasked with forming a transitional government and says it's time for stability and calm. Our correspondent Mohammed Chreyteh is in Damascus, and upon his arrival, he encountered jubilant scenes in the streets of the Syrian capital.
Here in the center of Damascus, in the Umayyad square, as you can see behind me, these young men are standing on a Syrian army tank that the army left here in the middle of the street. They're just chanting for freedom.
We are so happy. I don't have any words to talk about it. Yes, we are so happy.
It was so hard. Now we can feel freedom and happiness. We can do everything. We can study, we can work with more salary. Yes, we are happy.
Why are you so happy today?
Because we can do whatever we want. We can really enjoy our lives. I don't know.
So you don't have any words to say?
I can't describe it.
So I'm in Damascus, in the center of the city, for the first time in my life. My first impression is it's a bit chaotic. There's chaos all over the place, but everyone is cheering. Everyone is happy. People are approaching us to speak, to celebratory gunfire. So everyone is approaching us to speak about their ambitions. They just want to express their happiness about the downfall of the Assad regime. You can see, everyone smiling, chanting for freedom, celebrating on an old tank that the Syrian army left there in the middle of the square. So that's my first impression.
Let's bring in Matthias Ebert. He's in the city of Hasaka in the northeast of Syria. Matthias, Mohamad al-Bashir has been appointed interim prime minister. Who is this man, and how have Syrians you've talked to been reacting to the news?
Yeah, this man was responsible for the administration of the Idlib governorate, where HTS was located before they marched to Damascus, and he was a man who was known for administrating it efficiently and in a professional way, so that this region could establish the structure is needed in order to topple Assad. Then he is now appointed, and he should strengthen the links between Idlib administrators, the cabinet, the ministers in Idlib region, and the new government in Damascus, in order to establish in Damascus a rule similar to that of HTS in Idlib. And I think many people expect from him stability and a good and stable transition, but not all of Syrians are happy or are really looking positively towards this new administration, which will last at least until 1st of March, because some of them see him as a important religious figure and person in Idlib. He was responsible for religious affairs there, and therefore many people are a little bit frightened whether he might be a man who will establish a strong and fundamental Islamist rule. But so far, we do not have an idea what will be the real outcome of his administration.
Yeah, this is indeed a very tense time for Syria and a crossroads. How confident are the people you've been able to meet that the Islamist rebels essentially will bring stability?
Yeah, it's not sure, because the Kurds here in the area where I am, they are facing heavy attacks from the SNA militia group who is backed by Turkey. They are in different locations trying to push forward to the Kurdish region. For example, in Manbij, close to the Euphrates River, as well in Kobane, clashes are expected to happen. And also close to our place here, around 40 kilometers from Hasaka, they are also attacking Kurdish SDF fighter positions So yeah, it's not for sure whether the new government in Damascus will have really a control over the whole territory and the control over every militia which is involved in these battles, because they're really it's not one voice the militias talk with. There are really many interests and many different goals.
That was journalist Matthias Ebert speaking to us from Hasaka in Syria. Great to have you on the show, Matthias. Thank you so much for that. Thousands of Syrians have been returning home from neighboring Turkey since the fall of the Assad regime. More than 3 million people escaped to Turkey after the start of the civil war in 2011. Many of them are now hoping to return despite the political uncertainty. Turkey has given shelter to more Syrian refugees than any other country. An economic crisis means they face rising anti-migrant rhetoric and even violent attacks there. Now, our correspondent Julia Hahn is at a crossing on Turkey's border with Syria. I asked her a short while ago what the situation there was today.
Well, we have been here yesterday around the same time of day at this exact border crossing. And today I see less people lining up here waiting to return to Syria. But right behind me, you can actually see how people, families with small children with their belongings are being processed. Many Syrians living here in Turkey, you have to know, are originally from Aleppo, Syria's second largest city. Around 40% of the refugees here. So many people we speak with here are telling us that's where they want to go back to. Aleppo, in fact, is just about an hour's drive here from the Turkish border into Syria. Now, Turkish authorities have not disclosed any figures about how many people have, in fact, returned in the past few days since the fall of the Assad regime. But the Turkish interior minister yesterday said that Turkey has stepped up its capacities to accommodate such border crossings from previously around 3,000 crossings a day to now 15 to 20,000. The Turkish authorities have also opened up an additional border crossing, so now there are 6 of them. That reflects the expectation on behalf of the Turkish government that there would be rapid returns of Syrians back to their home country. But migration experts are more cautious, saying the repatriation process could take even years because many people, obviously, they have built up lives here in Turkey. They went to school, to university. They've set up businesses, so they risk a lot leaving all that behind. And many people also tell me they are cautious because there are just so many uncertainties there across the border in Syria. What kind of Syria are we going to see? That's what, of course, is on people's mind here on the Turkish side.
Now, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been a longtime backer of the Syrian rebels, and it's widely expected for him to seize this as a moment of opportunity. Let's look at how that could pan out.
Turkish President Erdogan, a key supporter of the opposition in Syria, is one of the big winners from the fall of Bashar Assad.
Turkey can bolster its leverage in shaping Syria's future and strengthen its position in negotiations over any political settlement.
Here's how Turkey ended up in such a strong position. In less than 2 weeks, opposition fighters from the Islamist Hayat Tahrir al-Sham group, together with Turkey-backed rebels, toppled Assad's regime. 13 years after his crackdown on anti-government protests ignited Syria's civil war. The rebels captured the main northern city of Aleppo near the Turkish border before pushing all the way to the capital Damascus.
Assad ran away, leaving behind a Syria where nearly 1 million people were massacred. 12 million people had to leave, and many cities were turned to rubble.
Erdogan's government has so far denied any involvement in the rebels' operation, but Erdogan has long pushed for the ouster of Assad, calling him a murderer and backing opposition forces in Syria's northwest.
It's highly improbable that this operation could have occurred at the scale and the speed observed without at least some sort of tacit Turkish support or at least green light.
So how does Turkey benefit from all this? You can see one way here at the Turkish border where some Syrians have gathered with their families, their belongings, suitcases, ready to head back home, back to Syria. Erdogan can make good on his promise to return many of the 3 million Syrian refugees Turkey has hosted for more than a decade. Anti-immigrant sentiment is rife here in the country, and Erdogan has come under increasing pressure to send people back.
I'm going to Damascus now to see my family. I haven't seen them in 14 years. Now I will see them. Assad took our land, he took our homes. Now that Assad is gone, God willing, we will take them back.
It's not important what I'm going to eat, what I'm going to drink. It's important that I'm going my home. My home is free, Syria is free, and that's it.
Erdogan is also looking for security benefits. In northwest Syria, he's pushing ahead with plans to establish what he calls a security corridor. Turkey-backed rebels have launched an offensive against Kurdish fighters, trying to expel them from the Turkish border. This has sent local Kurdish civilians fleeing for safety.
The offensive also allows Turkey to push back Kurdish fighters and displacing them from strategic positions and weakening the Kurdish-led SDF, which Turkey views as a security threat due to its links with the PKK.
But these apparent wins don't come without risks for Erdogan in the longer term. Ankara does not control the Islamist Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which it officially considers a terrorist group, and it remains unclear if Turkey wants to expand its influence in the area now controlled by the group.
Extending influence over the newly captured territories, particularly Aleppo, which is a huge city, would demand substantial economic and political investments from Turkey, right? And Turkey's past experience in managing areas under its de facto control in northern Syria has been fraught with challenges, which included local discontent and even violent resistance.
For now, it looks like Erdogan's hand has been strengthened, while Iran and Russia have lost regional influence with their ally Assad's demise. But the political battle for Syria's future has yet to be decided.
Julia, there now appears to be a ceasefire between the Kurdish fighters in Syria and the rebels supported by Turkey. Is that in Turkey's interest?
Well, the ceasefire is according to the Kurdish SDF group, who said it was a U.S.-mediated initiative to guarantee, quote, the security and safety of the civilians in the area. But I think the overall security situation there remains volatile. Turkey-backed rebels have, over the past 2 weeks or so, fought those Kurdish fighters, trying to push them away from the Turkish border, because Ankara sees elements among those Kurdish groups as allied with the PKK, which has waged a decades-long insurgency here in Turkey and is considered a terrorist group by Turkey, but also by the European Union. So it remains to be seen. But the violent clashes there in the area, according to one war monitor, have killed more than 200 people, and they have displaced many. So this is, so to speak, a second offensive that has been playing out there near the Turkish border in recent days, and that's something we should definitely also watch out for. Although, of course, the main attention is on the areas that have been captured by the main Islamist group, the HTS, Damascus, Aleppo, and other big cities.
What role do you expect for Syria to play for Turkey in the future?
Well, I think the question is the other way around. What role might Turkey play for Syria in the future? And there is, of course, the obvious issue of reconstruction and rebuilding Syria after all the destruction, devastation of the last nearly 14 years. This will be a massive, massive challenge, very costly. I can well imagine that Turkish construction companies would want to get involved, but I think the money for all of that must have to come from elsewhere because of Turkey's ailing economy, to just name one reason. But I think leaders in Western capitals, they have understood that when it comes to Syria's future, they just have to talk with Ankara, and that's what we're seeing now. The Turkish president had a phone call with the German chancellor yesterday, with the EU Commission chief, with the US government. There have been talks. talks. And I think that's what we are going to see continue to happen, because negotiations over Syria's political future, they continue, and they are not over yet.
That was Julia Hahn. Thank you so much for your reporting. Always great speaking to you. And we want to look at the international players involved in the situation in Syria. And for that, I'm joined now in the studio by Middle East expert Daniel Gerlach. Daniel, which of the many players with stakes in Syria are you watching most closely these days?
I think the most relevant international actor is Turkey at the moment, on all fronts. That pertains to the situation in Damascus and the building of a government, of a transitional government, but also the situation in the northeast, where your colleague Matthias Ebert just called from, because Turkey is militarily active there, is pushing back the so-called Syrian Democratic Forces, Kurdish militias, and so on. So Turkey is the most relevant actor, and Turkey is also the one, we have to say, who supported this rebel group and who gave them leeway to do this stunning success, even though the Turks, in my opinion, did not expect that to happen, but in the end jumped on the bandwagon and declared victory. But I think that's the most relevant actor.
Another neighbor, Israel, celebrated the fall of Assad, took credit for it in a way as well, and then immediately started bombing Syria. How destabilizing can that be for a situation very much in flux?
But first of all, it's being perceived in Syria as a very hostile gesture, as an attempt to exploit a situation, a power vacuum in your own interest. And I think the Israelis would have to explain to the Syrians why they create the so-called buffer zone, why they grab land, send tanks and military personnel into Syrian territory, even though they say we're just doing this to secure our own interest, or to make sure that we don't have any bad surprises. That's what they say, but in the end, you know, people in the region have a different perception of what Israeli military activity is for. The Israelis have been bombing various places, military installations, up to the port of Latakia, small navy ships which they destroy. So basically, they're trying to immobilize the Syrian, neutralize the Syrian military. Of course, the argument is we don't know what's going to happen in Syria, who's going to take over, if we will wake up with an enemy. And let's be frank, also, the Assad regime always had a very hostile posture towards Israel. But in the end, Assad never dared to do anything against Israel. He let in Hezbollah and the Iranians, but at the same time, the neighborhood between Israel and Assad was the most stable in the region. And many of the Israeli security establishment thought it was not a good idea to get rid of him. What's now happening is basically a scenario that's been planned for the situation of the downfall of the Assad regime. And now the Israeli military is acting according to its own protocol, and its political leadership is apparently comfortable with that.
For most of his rule, Assad was backed by Russia and Iran. What role do you expect them to play in the future?
Well, the Iranians they have to deal, of course, with this situation, because they have lost an important strategic asset in Syria. But the Iranians, at the same time, are very good at, later on telling everyone that was part of their strategy, that they realized they needed to pull out at the right moment, they needed to secure other interests, and they can come back anytime. I think the Iranian regime has a mentality of patience, and they would probably think, let's see what's happening in 5, 6, 7, 10 years, how the situation unfolds, and maybe we can then get back in and secure our interests. They have business interests there. But for the moment, I think what I hear also from the security establishment, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, like the elite force in Iran, is very uncomfortable with that situation. They think that was handled politically in a very, very irresponsible way. Yeah. But the good thing for the Iranians is the Iranian public is not interested really in Syria and Lebanon. They would be happy if Iran invested what they have into the well-being of the country and not venture in other countries. So there is no, ironically, domestic pressure in Iran to somehow take an aggressive posture now.
How about Russia?
Well, Russians, ironically, a bit the same, though for different reasons. The Russians have been supporting Assad for 10 years almost, but they realized that if Assad cannot defend himself, they are not going to invest anything to defend him. They provided the air power, but if they don't have any partners on the ground who fight against the rebels, they can't do much. And that was the case. The Syrian regime, the Iranians could not. So now Russia is going to tell us soon, I think, same approach, that they are very comfortable with a Sunni Islamist leadership in Syria, as long as it's not a Western associate as long as it's not a liberal democracy, a Western ally. And Russia, whatever is in its capacity, I think Putin is going to try to make sure that that doesn't happen, in cooperation with the Arabs, trying to support the Turks. But I think the Russians really understood that it was time to get out of the way.
What would a future government need to do to rein in that foreign meddling that has been so destabilizing in the past?
Well, that's a big challenge that Syrians are aware of. But I think we've seen it in other countries. The stronger the consensus inside the country is, the stronger the common vision is, the more difficult it gets for foreign interventions to manipulate the situation. Foreign actors that operate by proxy would usually use a group or a political party or some sort of a pressure group in order to gain leverage on the internal political process. So if Syrians want to avoid that, and they're very much used to foreign meddling, they should really find a consensus on how to organize this government, how to structure the regions, and the expertise is there. Yeah. There is people who have been preparing for this moment for a long time, even though they didn't expect it to happen that quickly.
Yeah. And a long road ahead. That was Daniel Gerlach, Middle East expert. Always great speaking to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Nicole.